What companies can we trust? What tools can we trust? I'm seeing this great divide happening right now between purpose-driven companies versus those that are maybe more toxic or don't necessarily care so much about the people. It's just assets for them and they can just get rid of them and, replace everybody by humanoid robotic.
Karin Volo is the Chief Joy Bringer, CEO of Evoloshen. How can we avoid that the fear of AI will erode our human connections? How can as well make sure that AI enhances rather than replaces our humanity and work?
We are in a system that is crashing and burning right now. Our old industrial systems are collapsing. That's why there's so much chaos right now. So the question and the opportunity for us is, what do we want to build? We need to build trust in our organizations. We need to build trust in the technology we're using.
Hello, everyone. My team and I have been crafting content and stories that inform, inspire, empower, and bring real value to you. If you haven't already, please take a moment to check that you're subscribed. It's the easiest way to support our work and stay updated with every new release. Join us on this journey of learning and discovery. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for our latest drops. Hello and welcome to the Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast, powered by citiesabc.com, businessabc.net, and wisdomia.ai. We keep profiling the global leaders, the thought leaders, and the people making a change in the world that is more and more disrupted and inspired by technologies, by artificial intelligence, by a lot of different things, but especially what we celebrate in this series and profile is the doers. Today, I'm particularly excited to welcome Karin Volo, Chief Joybringer, is an expert in employee engagement, organizational development, and best-selling author. With 20-plus years of experience working with Fortune 500 companies globally, she has insights on business building, cultural transformation, and high performance. Karin is the CEO of Evoloshen, an organization that provides corporate training and AI consulting to improve organizational performance and culture without losing the human connection. Evoloshen has been named one of the top 10 organizational development companies in Europe. Karin is a certified AI consultant and certified CIQ-TM coach. She is acknowledged as a global leader and employee engagement expert. Karin is also the co-founder of Achieving the AI Advantage, a global online summit that brings together experts in AI and business. Karin is a best-selling author with books including the Bringing Joy series of children books, 352 Days, An Inspirational Journey from Jail to Joy in 2015, Engage in 2014, and Rays of Truth in 2024. Karin was recently recognized in the inaugural 50 Women of Influence by Success Magazine.
Welcome again to a fantastic new podcast YouTube show. And today I'm very excited because I think I'm going to have one of the most sensitive and actually inspiring interviews that I did, and I've been having a lot. So I welcome to the series Karin Volo. As a prelude, I mean, Karin is a very special lady that has different layers in her work. And the more I speak with her, the more I admire her because of her personal thrive. And she went through a lot of things, but as well as a leader in the tech and content world and the community world. Especially as we speak into everything happening in the world in terms of what is happening around technology, artificial intelligence, the changes in society. She's one of the most inspiring ladies that I had the privilege to engage. So just as a couple of notes, so Karin Volo is the Chief Joy Bringer and is an expert employee engagement in organizational development and a best-selling author. And her experience as the CEO of Evoloshen brings a lot of experience that I think are key for a lot of people listening to us all over the world. And we'll be discussing this during the interview, but I want to highlight this as a prelude because one of the challenges I've been facing, even dealing with people, and I love people, is definitely we're going through a lot of changes, but I think some of the things everyone perceives is in a different way. And this is creating a fragmented elements that bring us to a lot of levels. So without further ado, Karin, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for making it.
Thank you, Dinis, and I'm thrilled to be here with you. We met recently, and we've had this great connection, and been collaborating on a few things. I'm looking forward to this as well.
No, fantastic. So, I want to start with your personal background. So, you have, well, I would say a lot of stories, and your stories are amazing. From the US to Sweden, from all the things you had on the personal level, and we'll touch that. But before we go to some of your experience that were actually in your adult, a bit of your education background, and as well, I would say that before the challenge and opportunities that we had, a bit of what made I always like to go to your 12 years old or 13 years old, and Vitz, if you would go back to your 12 years old self, what would be something that you would say, okay, my life was kind of a roller coaster adventure, let's put it that way?
Oh my God, I've not been asked that before. And I'm just like, oh boy, if my 12-year-old knew what I was going to go through, I'd be scared to death. But here's what I would say to that 12-year-old girl. You're going to make it and you're going to be fine. So just hang in there. And maybe like guide her a little bit more to not make certain decisions. But everything that happens in our lives happens for us, not to us. I believe very strongly on that. So it gets us out of the victim mentality. And when we learn that part, it actually helps to empower that we can reframe any crisis or traumas that we go through to help us become the best version of ourselves. That's what I truly believe.
No, that's very special, and you went through a lot of things. Let's put it that way. That I know that we're going to be sharing here. So, so on your publications, let's start with that because it goes to some of these things. So, you are a serial entrepreneur. You are as well working with Fortune 500, and at the same time, you have a very, I would say, focus on personal developing, coaching, and a lot of leadership capacity that I think is very special for everyone right now in the world. And as well, as someone that works with organizations, you know how to deal with the dynamics of organizations, the present and future of work, but then you have your own story. And I want to start with that personal story because one of your publications, and let's touch this, let's probably the elephant in the room because it's a very sensitive one, is that you have 1,352 days, an inspirational journey from jail to joy. And this is one of your publications from 2015, 10 years ago. So I want to touch this, and I know that it's very sensitive, but I want to share this for our audience because it's something that when I see people complaining, I think not a lot of people went through what you went through. And you have a fantastic joy, actually. You call yourself Chief Joy, which is very beautiful. So I want to hear your story, and the stories is what makes us strong and special.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of the background, I'm half Swedish, half American, grew up in the States. I was actually born in Mexico. And in 2000, I moved to Sweden because my first husband had been convicted of fraud. And I just turned my whole world upside down. I moved to Sweden to be with my mom. I had two little girls at that time. And when I started to research him, I found out he'd lied to me from day one on everything. So I was in shock. I went through, which I didn't know at the time, but cognitive dissonance. I actually fainted, and it was just like, wow, who was I married to? So I just kind of shook it all off, swept it under the rug, did not deal with it, and just because I had to, support my little girls and start my life over. So I did, and got back into executive search, which had been my career back in the US. And then in 2006, I was at a point where I was ready to open up and franchise my executive search firm throughout Europe. It was like I was on the top of the world. And, I often ask people, like, do you remember a time when everything was going really well and you were in flow? And it was just like, wow, everything was fabulous. Well, that was that time in March of 2006. And then after a full week of working with a business mentor in San Diego, California, John Assaraf, I was on top of the world, and I was at the airport waiting to get onto the plane to come back to Sweden. And I felt a tap on my shoulder, and I turned around, and there were two U.S. Marshals, and they said 7 words that completely changed my life in a heartbeat. It was, we have a warrant for your arrest. And they proceeded to take me into custody. I went into shock. I heard my first husband's name, and I thought, oh no. And what had happened is that he had used my name because I was born in Mexico on his business dealings in Mexico. And so they were going to try and extradite me to Mexico. So I sat in a high security jail in downtown San Diego for 1,352 days, hence the title of my book, which is almost 4 years, and tried to survive through this nightmare story. And basically, I was, fighting against this extradition. And by the time it finally got in front of a judge in Mexico, he closed the case out, said this shouldn't have ever been a criminal case. And it was, a crazy time. So during those 4 years, or almost 4 years, I was living day to day, total uncertainty, total fear, especially in the beginning, because you sit in a high security jail and you don't know the type of people you're going to meet. I was afraid of getting raped. I was afraid of getting beat up. I was afraid of all of these things, right? And over time, like, you get tough. I got a little jail walk. And I mean, I was just, meeting all these people. And it was fascinating for me because over time I went on a deep spiritual journey for myself, trying to manage this whole situation. But I met so many people and heard so many stories of people I would never cross paths with in my life. So it was really, I kind of started to turn it into a study of people. And over the time, I found ways to survive in that very dark environment. And I just had this vision, I had this hope, I had this dream that I would focus in. Every time the fear would take over, I would focus on the love instead, the love of my family, the love of my daughters, and getting back home and being a mom. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. My charges were completely dropped. I was released and I got to come home to Sweden. And that started me on almost a 2-year journey coming back of trying to figure out, what do I do with my life now? I can't figure it out. And I mean, I was doing some deep soul searching and trying to heal from this trauma, being back to being a mom and being with my girls. And it was during that time when I did a lot of personal inner work, is what I call it, to figure out my purpose. And one thing I'll just mention here, during the 4 years, I was actually ended up writing children's books for my daughters. And this was a series of books called Bringing Joy. So there was kind of this red thread going through my life. So when I came home and started to do the purpose work, I was just trying to figure out, why am I here? And I knew deep down I couldn't go back to the executive search because I felt if I did that, something inside of me would die. I knew that I had to use this experience in a way that would help people. And I knew all these tools that worked because I tested every single one of those. And I just worked with a lot of different things that helped me during this very, very dark time of my life. And so eventually ended up writing a book called Engage. And that was really the catalyst to start the work that I do today. So I'll kind of pause there because there's a lot more to this whole journey. But it was a crazy time. But it was a catalyst for me to get on my purpose, figure that out, and then start that journey.
So, well, first of all, it's I think when we start like that, you get a bit speechless. But at the same time, it shows your strength, your capacity, because you were 4 years paying for something you didn't do anything, and of course you were a live, but it was 4 years of your life, and you had children as well. So I just want to touch this. So during these 4 years, and I understand how this impacts everything, our personal dignity, your personal health, mental health, well-being, and as well security, and as well you as a mother, because suddenly you are 4 years without being able to see your children, and a lot of other things. So, and as well in your case, we're talking about this was actually your ex-husband, so it's more sensitive because you had someone in your life that partly destroyed your life. I want to, of course, this is kind of very personal, but I have to ask. So, and I think for people listening to us, especially in a world that we have so much layers, and of course everyone hears about deepfakes and how people can go and do not the nicest things. But this is another level. So I wanted just to touch, for instance, you said that you went through a spiritual journey. So just speaking in your words, and you said as well that it changed, and you met as well a lot of people, I'm sure, during these 4 years that changed. And so let's look on the family. I always like to look, and although I don't, this is a podcast about technology and business, I want to touch on the personal, probably on that. So because I think this is very important, this resilience that you have, I think is unique for anyone that is listening to us. And I'm sure that not a lot of people went through this experience, especially my audience, but as well, it shows your joy and your love for life. So I want to just, so especially how do you cope personally? Because I think it's I'm interested to hear that. Of course, whatever you want to share. And second, how you kept your resilience, psychological and as well emotional, because that's not a small thing, and especially for someone that was very successful on the corporate world.
Yeah, when you go through really dark times, it can break you, or you can make a choice. And that was me really in making a choice. Number one, to just get through each day. And yeah, absolutely. There were very dark days, hard days, days that I cried, but you couldn't like show you were crying. So like hide yourself under the sheets and pretend you're sleeping and just sit there and cry. Um, so there's a lot of things that went on, but I think I just took it one day at a time. And then I had a lot of help and support from, interesting people that kind of came into my life that helped me a lot. Like I had one person that was sending me all these books. And I mean, I was literally reading 2 or 3 different books a day to vary my day because it was just a very monotonous type of environment. I was doing yoga. I was self-taught and started teaching yoga. So, I mean, that helped a lot in terms of just moving the physical body and being able to sleep and those types of things. And I think, yeah, it was just, I learned so much in terms of trying to cope in that very, very dark environment. And there's this thing called servant leadership. And initially, when you're going through something, you have this victim mentality. Why is this happening to me? Why did, and I was beating myself up a lot. Like, how could I be so stupid to fall for this man? Why didn't I see this? And I thought, I'm a pretty intelligent woman. Why didn't I see this? And I have had so many women come to me and say, oh, I've gone through the same thing. So, and back then we didn't have words like gaslighting and narcissist. And I mean, mine was actually a psychopath. But anyway, it was just, all of these things. So I was just learning to cope on a day-to-day basis. I read a lot of spiritual text. I read the Bible twice. I read the Course of Miracles twice. I read the I Ching and the Quran. I mean, just everything. And I started to see patterns, which, I'd seen a lot of patterns before in my life anyway. But yeah, those types of things just can give you resiliency. So one of the things that I learned, and this is a lesson that people can take away, the quality of the questions you ask will determine the kind of life that you're going to live. So in the beginning, I was asking very disempowering questions like, why is this happening to me? And how could I be so dumb? And, and a lot of anger and frustration and depression and all of those things. And I really had to work with my emotional state to get out of trying to get in a better positive frame of mind one way or another. So I had a definite choice between love and fear. And every time the fear took over, I just would like stop my brain and say, nope, that's not what I want. And I'm going to my vision of, going home. My charges are dropped. I'm with my kids. So the questions we ask can either be disempowering or empowering. And like I said in the beginning, things happen to us or for us. So I started asking questions. Well, why is this happening for me? How can I help somebody else? What can I do to serve? And I started to feel better literally by changing those questions because I reframed it into kind of a psychological study of people. And yeah, I think those questions helped me to bring back my own power. And I think, if you're in a position where you're asking questions like that are disempowering, why is this happening to me? Or, the world looks like horrible and it's scary and what's going on? What can we do to reframe that and say, well, why is this happening for me? And look for the lessons there. And when you do that, your physiology changes. I've studied a lot of neuroscience after the fact now over the past decade. And, it's fascinating how much power we have within us that we don't really know how to tap into. So I'll pause there. I know this is a lot.
No, it's very special, Anna, and I think this is key because I think we are precisely what you just mentioned, the internal dialogue you did with yourself, and the way you ask questions, the way you put these questions towards reframing your life and the challenge you're going through. This is actually very interesting because we are dealing with technology, we're dealing with the present of work becoming completely changed upside down because, for instance, as we speak, we're going to have probably the biggest disruption in terms of work ever in history, especially for people like us, it is even worse for the rest of people that have not even that. So I just want to ask one thing. So as a mother as well, so you have children, of course. That's very violent, especially because I know that you're a great mother and you wrote the books for your children as well. So that's very special. On that level, how did you cope? Because I know that a lot of people, especially in business, 90% of successful business, probably 99, is the capacity to be resilient. and the capacity to persist independent of your challenge, because most of the people give up. And most of the people are not entrepreneur. They want to work with someone because they cannot own their life. They're afraid of getting out of their comfort zones. So your story is a fantastic story of, first of all, going through this and getting out of this. And you were completely innocent. You didn't do anything besides probably marrying the wrong person. And as well, these children were children of him. So probably it's even more complex for you because you will have always to go through that. So I just want to touch that because, and I know we go more to your business acumen, but I think this is, important for everyone listening to us. And I always think about gratitude and personal developing and as well resilience. And I always try to pass this to my team, especially young people, because a lot of people give up. And most of the people want to be told what to do. And with AI, this is going to be augmented millions of times, and as well as going to disrupt it at another level. So I want to just touch this on that personal level.
Yeah. When it first happened, I actually felt something shut down in my heart because it was too painful. And I can't really explain what happened, but I could not deal and feel with that pain. And so something shut down in my heart to kind of protect me in that environment. A couple years into the whole experience and nightmare, I was coming up on the second Christmas being away from my daughters, and I was devastated because I was like, what kind of mother stays away from her kids for Christmas? And I was in so much pain. And I literally prayed and just said, I can't take this. This hurts too much. How am I going to get through this? And I literally, I had such a visceral experience, but I felt the pain being lifted out of my heart. And I can't really explain it other than I just know something above was helping me through that. And I came to a point where I reached acceptance and surrender. I said, there's nothing I can do about this. You cannot control your external circumstances sometimes. So what can you control? How you respond to things. And with the help of, these prayers, I managed to get through it, and I felt the pain lifted out, and I got through that time. And it was kind of a very profound experience. And I had a lot of profound experiences while I was there. So, yeah, if it doesn't break you, it'll make you much stronger. And that's why, I do consider myself an expert on resilience just from life experiences. So, and I know everybody has traumas that we go through. And the thing is, we sweep it under the carpet. And if you don't deal with it, it actually sits in a cellular level. So I can talk about this a lot because I've written the book. I've gone to deep therapy. I have told the story over and over, so to the point where I can tell the story without crying. So, I've processed it, and that's what we all need to do. And I think right now the world is changing so much, and there's so many changes and, things happening all over the place. And I think it's bringing up to light the traumas that people have had in their lives that it's time to clear it out, time to deal with it and feel those emotions and basically lighten our load. That's what I feel is really happening right now. So,
no, it's very special, and thank you for sharing that so special things with us, because it's I feel inspired, and of course my respect for you keeps growing. But as well as it's a case that I want to share with everyone listening to us, because I believe so much people that I meet that are always complaining, that are always going through challenges, and I'm sure they don't even have probably 1% or even 0.1% of the stress that you went through. So,
and let me just add one more thing, because you did mention gratitude, and I meant to say this earlier, but gratitude is a superpower. It was definitely one of the things that I worked with. My second husband at the time, he was taking care of my daughters, and they would think about gratitude every night and think of 3 things that you were grateful for every night. And I was doing the same. So that was one of those things that kept our family kind of connected at the time. And then since then, I've worked very deeply with gratitude. I understand the neuroscience of gratitude, why that is such a powerful tool, and just sharing gratitude, thinking about it is really powerful. But then if you can write it down, that's even more powerful. I actually run gratitude groups where I have, different groups of people, and we share gratitude with each other. And on those days where it's really hard for you to figure out something that you're feeling grateful for, reading someone else's gratitude actually can be like, oh, right, I can be grateful for that. And it helps. So there's these different dimensions. So again, gratitude, whatever way you want to work with it or use it as a tool, because I call it a tool, and this can be something that can really transform people's lives.
No, it's very special. So from this episode, which is like, I would say, interlude in your life, because you had a very fantastic career. Then we had this episode, and you come back again. So tell us about that comeback, and of course, about how you went from being cleaned of something you didn't do, but spending, it's like you had your life on hold for 4 years with a massive stress, and then you mostly you flourish again into fantastic international personality. And I'm sure there's a lot of work on rebuilding your brand, explaining to people what you went through with your daughters, with a lot of things. I want to just see how we went from that experience, and then you rebuild your career, which is amazing international, the impact you have and the community that you lead internationally.
It's always knew I was going to write a personal story, and I could not write it during those years because I didn't know the ending. So when I came home, I actually did the first couple of drafts of my personal story, but then I ended up writing a business book. There's a long story behind that. We won't get into that, but I wrote a business book called Engage, and that came out in 2012. And that was really kind of the pivot I did with the business, because I knew when I came home after going through all the therapy and figuring out my, purpose and all those things, that I was meant to do something bigger with everything that I'd learned, and I needed to reach people. And so when the book Engage came out, it was working on culture and how do you create an environment that you love and enjoy, and working on engagement and changing the behavior. So I was able to take a lot of the things that I had learned and put that into that book in a way that could impact people in the workplace. And I often say that when you write a book, it opens doors you didn't even know existed. So I hadn't planned on being a public speaker. Even though I had studied speech communication at university, it was like, I'm never going to be on a stage. I don't want to do that. And then when I came back, I was completely purpose driven. And for me, because I was so purpose driven on bringing joy to people, I basically did whatever I had to do to get the message out. And so that led me into a public speaking career. And then it led me into creating certification training on cultural engagement, and just figuring out ways that I could get this message out there as much as possible. And then during those years, and then my memoir came out in 2015. So that was when that book came out. And then I felt like a little side shift, because it was like all of a sudden I was talking about my personal story so much, but people were very interested in it. And, I ended up going on TV and all these things that, again, because I was purpose driven, I wanted the message to get out there and reach people. And then after that, with the cultural work I was doing, it led to focusing in on trust. And, for me, the irony is not lost on me, because I was pretty naive and trusting the wrong person and the wrong people, very early on in life. And so that I would end up teaching about trust. It's like, that makes sense. That's one of my probably big life lessons. So, yeah, I got certified in a body of work called conversational intelligence, which is very much based in neuroscience. And then I started teaching leaders on trust. And it was very interesting to me, because this trust training that I was doing, I saw it transcended any sort of cultural differences, say with countries, because we're all human beings. We're all hardwired the same way through neuroscience. And when people learn neuroscience, it changes them, because it realizes, oh, I can take, if you understand how your body works from a neurochemical basis, you can have better conversations, you can relate better to people, you build that level of trust. And so it was really transformative to see how much of an impact that could have on people.
No,
So, yeah.
it was very special. So on all that part, so first of all, starting your own business and rebuilding yourself. So let's look at right now your present. I still have some questions on that I'm processing as well, so I appreciate. So let's look at your career. So since then, you study what you just mentioned. You got all of these things, and you started your businesses, and you created an amazing amount of things. So tell us about this career, because of course we talk only of the trauma, but just for people listening to us, you work on Easy Park case study, guiding 320 employees that's across 15 countries through a 6-week online conversational intelligence program. That's a case study, very interesting. You are the CEO of Evoloshen. You are a certified AI consultant and a certified CIQ coach, and you're a global leader on the employee and engagement in areas. So this is just some of the things that you have, but as well, of course, you are the co-founder of Achieving the AI Advantage. So let's go through these projects because they are each of them is probably a podcast in itself. But let's go at least for people listening to us that don't know about these projects to know a bit of each of them.
Yeah. So let me just, I'll pick up the thread, and it is a bit chronological. So I was working a lot on trust and working with executive teams and managers on trust and teaching this igniting your trust factor training. And then COVID hit. And fortunately, at that point, I had been working with a large consulting company and I was doing a lot online. And so I was able to pivot the business pretty quickly because we'd already done things online. And then it was very interesting. Easy Park was a very pivotal client for us because that was the first time, because people couldn't meet in person and they always had this annual kickoff. They couldn't meet. And so we decided, well, let's just have everybody take this trust training. Why not? You know, we can do it all online, and everyone was used to doing these things. And so that was the first time I'd actually run my trust training with like the entire company. And it was a big surprise to me to see how much of an impact that had on the entire culture, because prior to that, it was always with leaders. But when people started learning these tools together as a group, it shifted the whole culture. The dialogue and the verbiage and the tools went into the culture so deeply, and that really prepared this company to go through tripling in size, you know, the following year. So things were going really well. The COVID years were actually really good for me because I had already done a lot online. So it was a quick pivot for my business. And then, unfortunately, continuing on, in January of 2023, I got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And it was like, oh my gosh. I had, 11 companies that had put projects on hold in the fall of 2022 saying, oh, we'll work with you starting next year. And then I couldn't work. So I had to shut down everything for 6 months. And I just went on a big inner journey again. And for me, it was like, okay, I've done 4 years of jail. I could do 6 months of chemo and go through all that. And so I did. And I had a lot of deep experiences during that whole time frame as well, which, we won't get into here. But basically, that was the time when AI had gone viral and I missed all of it. So I didn't know anything about AI. So I got through the whole chemo, went through all that, started to rebuild my physical self, my body, and I had never had a physical issue. I'd never been physically sick. So there were a lot of reasons why this happened for me, not to me, and was able to, process that. And then coming out of that, I started to study AI. And when I initially was afraid of it, I was like, are we even ready for this? What is going to be happening to the world? And I had a lot of reservations and hesitations about AI. And as I started to study it a bit and took some classes, I realized, oh my gosh, this is going to change everybody, everywhere across the world. We're in a massive paradigm shift. This is the start of it. And so I ended up diving into a deep certification training and got 3 certifications: AI consulting, AI implementation, and data science, which things I'd never thought I'd study, but I have a good, deep understanding of AI. And I realized I can use this in the culture work and the trust work because those 3 are very pivotal in terms of working on an organizational level. And anytime I'm working with anybody, it's always, we start on the individual level, personal, and then we look to teams, and then we look to organizations. And then we can go above and beyond that, which I think that's where your work is so beautiful, Dinesh, because you go into societal and humanity, So it's just being able to empower people with tools that they can use. And, AI is just another thing. And the most fascinating thing for me is during the years that I've been focused on culture, it came down to, if you have a great level of trust, it's like the foundation for any culture, for any company. You get a good trust foundation, you can build anything on top of that. And I'm seeing the same thing happen with technology and with AI. What companies can we trust? What tools can we trust? And, I'm looking a lot at the values of the companies that are coming out with all these new AI things and tools. And it's like, okay, and I'm a really big proponent on having trust within technology. And then the last thing I'll mention here, you did talk about the Achieving the AI Advantage Summit. I ran that in September, just a month ago or so, in 2025. And that's how we met. We got you on our summit and it was great. And for me, it was really pivotal because I really want to focus in on supporting leaders who have these same values of using AI and business and technology for good.
Yeah, that's Well, first of all, congratulations. Your community is vibrant and is great people as well, which is a fantastic achievement you have, especially with everything you went through. So, one question, because your issues, your health issues, and of course, cancer is not a small thing, were just 2 years ago. So, so in 2 years as well, you look very healthy. I hope everything is well. So, how did you
Oh,
cope?
good.
How did you went? Because chemotherapy is hardcore. I have some friends and relatives that went through that. So and is well very drowning because it's about your life and as well it affects physically, emotional, and a lot of things. So that was a second trial. So it made you even more resilient. But you kept, like you said, in the process of just 2 years, you reinvent yourself, you got into AI, and you start working with leaders on that. So I think this is a masterclass of resilience that I think everyone should look. But I want to go from the theory to the practice. So, for instance, during the process of chemotherapy, like I said, you're working with big multinationals, with a lot of companies, a lot of people around the world, and as well different cultures that look at things in different ways. So, tell us a bit about that as much as you can share.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I listen a lot inside, so I have a deep connection to my intuition, my gut instinct as to, what direction to go. And I tend to be an early adapter on certain things. I'm not a tech person at all, but I was very early into the culture and engagement thing. And I had to do a lot of education for, Europe, especially because it was big in the US, it was big in the UK. So that was a lot of my speaking then. Now I'm seeing the same thing with AI. There's so much happening. It's changing so quickly. And people who have, their jobs, they're working in companies, they're leaders, they're managers, they're overwhelmed. They don't have the time and effort to really study all of these things. So, working with somebody that can shortcut that for them is really powerful. That's one of the reasons I decided to get certified in AI myself, is because if I can understand and go to a group, which is, my consultants and everybody that I work with, we can narrow it down. There's over 40,000 new AI startups right now, and it's overwhelming. How do you know which ones to work with? Coming back to the health issues, I will tell you that that was a very deep experience as well, just because I'd been through so much earlier. I had a lot of tools. And I think because I had all those tools that I had learned while I was in the jail experience over the last decade with what I was teaching, going into the neuroscience, I was able to manage that health issue and crisis in a way because I did have so many tools to work with. It was one of the hardest things. It is the hardest thing I've gone through on a physical level, but on an emotional, mental, and spiritual level, I had a lot of tools to handle it. And so, I think again, coming back to the resilience thing, we need to have a lot of resiliency in our own individual lives. And I will tell you across the board, every single person has a crisis, a trauma in their life. They might not talk about it, but they carry it. And, they're dealing with it. That's who's showing up at the workplace. And where we're going now is that, if we can have leaders that care about their people, that genuinely want to take, help them in whatever way, help them reach their best self. I mean, the workplace, we spend more hours there, and that's the place where we can really thrive if we choose that that's what we want to do. But it's really important that we know what we're passionate about, what we value, and find a place that aligns with that. So we have that sense of belonging, that tribe that we can, serve and be in our highest level of ourselves. So there's so many different directions we can take this. And it's like, I'll leave it to you, Dinesh. Where do you want to go with this next?
No, it's amazing. There's a lot of things to unpack there. So let's go by part. So I want to touch, of course, in the challenge of AI, but before that, so one of the things that you call yourself, and I love that, is Chief Joy Bringer. So tell us about that.
So that comes back to when I came home from the jail experience. I was lost. I was trying to figure out what am I supposed to do with my life now after going through that. I knew deep in my gut, I cannot go back to the executive search. I have to take whatever I've learned and get this out in some way. So finding my purpose was a process I went through, and I have actually run discovering your purpose programs both for individuals and for companies to figure out, what is your purpose statement. And so when I was doing this work, bringing joy to the world became my purpose statement. And it ties into this red thread that has always been through my life. So if you remember when you asked me in the beginning, what would I say to my 12-year-old self? I'm going to tell a little side story here because I think it's kind of interesting and it fits in. I don't know that I've told this story before, but I was about 12, 13 maybe, and I was very shy. And I remember being somewhere and there was, I went to the bathroom and I came back out and there were these three teenagers walking towards me and they said hi. And I just didn't say hi back. I was scared. And then, I heard one of the girls say, "Oh my God, what a blank." And I was shocked because I was like, "No, I'm not. I didn't know how to say hi." So I promised myself from that moment on, if anyone ever says hi to me, I'm going to say hi back and I'm going to say hi to people, and it's just like, so then, as I go through my whole life, I saw this red thread of wanting to make people smile, make them feel good some way, And I have done the Gallup Strength Finders, which I highly recommend for people. And my first one is connector. I love connecting people. But my second one is positivity. So I am personally hardwired to see the brighter side, to look at the positive things, And that those Gallup strengths can either be really strong and they do have, maybe the negative side. So the negative side of being hardwired for positivity is that you can be naive and not see the negative, which was also me, So I've learned all those things. So basically, I think, we have so much within ourselves, and each individual is so rich as an individual with our unique experiences. There's no one else on this planet who has lived through what you've lived through or experienced. And so we have to kind of acknowledge and honor our differences, but understand that on the bottom, we all want the same things. Majority of us, 99.999% of people want love, we want abundance, we want peace, and we want joy and happiness. What more do you want in life? And then we all have our own different ways of expressing that. We're not getting very technical here because it's
No,
all.
but this is very important because, for instance, what you just said, for instance, now let's deep dive in the work you're doing in professional workplace and all the coaching you're doing with both your companies, both with your community. So one of the biggest challenges, for instance, like we just mentioned, for instance, you mentioned about positivity and negativity. If you look, for instance, most of the internet, and this is actually a study from UNESCO, most of the LLMs are learning with the worst of humans. Because if you go to social media, if you go to, well, a lot of the news, actually, you don't see positivity, actually, by the contrary. So what you just said is, I would say, contrarian to most of the innuendos that we have in our present world. Although, ironically, probably the world is actually, there was actually a researcher from Sweden that looked at statistics around the world. I forgot his name now. I wanted to mention, but I'll come back probably. That mentioned, if you look at history of humanity, we are in the best time ever, even with all the challenges that we all go through. So coming back to this positive versus negativity, and because you work with the workforce and people around the world. So one of the challenges I have is precisely as a leader, I'm not talking probably an individual, is dealing with different cultures. And one of the biggest challenges probably that I face, and I'm sure every leader in the world, is, of course, if you are, at the moment, we have a paradox in the world economy because we have all these advances in technology. Then at the same time, we have these big corporations that represent a huge part of the world economy. And then we have the SMEs and startups, the thousands that you mentioned. So, and we have a kind of a multiple different velocities because most of the people have no clue about AI, its impact, everything that is happening, which you and me have been talking for some time. And the other people are just trying to thrive and go through their challenges. So then it comes to cultural nuances. For instance, if my team, I have people in India, they think completely different from people in Vietnam. And if I am in Japan, it will be even more different. If I have in Africa, it will be different. So let's start by that nuance, how you deal with the workplace. And I'm talking here as you as a professional and, of course, an achieved professional and professional coach. What is the thing you, and I want to make it's a quite complex question. I always overcomplicate, but try to simplify afterwards, is that there's the human part, there's the cultural side, and then there's the technology side. Let's put it that way. And all these three levels, for instance, like you mentioned, your challenges made you much more resilient, but you found a way of dealing with this challenge that was fantastic, and that's why you keep thriving and so forth. But a lot of people get in very dark moments, and they run away from responsibilities. They blame other people. They go to social media, and we have to look at the elephant in the room. As most of, although I'm a bit like you, personal wise, not a bit. I'm a lot like you. That's why we got along. But what I feel is I strive as a CEO to get my team to speak the same language. And it's not easy as a CEO. And I'm quite, I would say, a bit mature on this, but I see a lot of young startups that have no clue what they're doing and they go through massive challenges. And then we have, of course, like big things worldwide. Like if you're in a big corporation, you have to kind of endorse your corporation culture. Where you are in the startups, you can do a bit whatever you want, but if it's a startup that has good funding or if a startup that has bad funding, you have all the challenges as well. So I want to touch it's quite complex, but the workplace is a mix of all of these. Although your clients are more multinationals, I'm sure there's a lot of sole traders, startups. Actually, most of the world economy is sole traders and SMEs and micro SMEs.
Yeah, so let me simplify this by just saying under the umbrella of culture, there's four pillars is what I talk about. So the first one is engagement, and those are the behaviors. Those are how you want people to be showing up to work. And I always say that if you're going to be engaged, it's a two-way street. You can create an environment where people can be engaged and thrive, but each individual needs to take responsibility for themselves as how they're showing up. So our energy, our emotions are actually contagious. So how we show up, if you come in and you're angry about things, it's going to spread. If you come in and you're feeling happy about things, it's going to spread. Our emotions are literally science-backed contagious. So you have to make a decision for yourself as an individual. How do I want to show up for work? How can I help others? Okay, so that's engagement. Second one is purpose. And purpose is having that bigger understanding of why you're here. And on an organizational level, companies need to be purpose-driven. It's been a bit whitewashed in, I think it was 2018, like 180 CEOs of global national companies, signed that they were going to become more purpose-driven. And that's good because at least we're talking about it now. Are they authentically purpose-driven or not? That time will tell on that. But I think that's really important because when you have a bigger why of what you're doing, it helps people to get attracted to that, connected to that. And, part of that is also knowing the values of why you are the way you are and as an organization, but also that you're connected as an individual. The third pillar is trust. As I've said, I've ended up being pulled into the level of trust because that really is the foundation. And that trust goes from manager to employee to the board to the vendors to your customers. I mean, it's just all angles. And when you can learn about trust, and this is where, you're talking about challenges with different cultures. And yes, absolutely, every culture is very different. But that's why the neuroscience is so powerful. That's why I'm so passionate about teaching about trust, because it transcends those cultural differences. And then the last pillar is what I call caring leadership. And this really was something I added in during the COVID years because I realized if a leader genuinely cares about the people and is creating an environment where they can thrive, it makes a huge difference because the loyalty is stronger for that person. You're willing to go above and beyond, which is engagement, right? So it all ties together. And those are the four pillars that I think really help to transform an organization. Now, when we talk about engagement, just coming back to that a little bit, because when AI started, becoming so popular, that's a way to super boost our engagement. And there's a difference between making a choice as a leader. Okay, are we going to lay off all these people and just replace them by AI? There's been examples of companies, I won't name the specific ones, but after a year, they've realized, oh, that was a mistake. Our customer service is tanking. Let's bring those people back, right? But if we use AI to enhance the human and what we're doing there, then that's the best of both worlds. So I think that's a really important distinction there that people need to realize. We do need to take care of ourselves. And really, our companies now are our tribes. Back in the day, we didn't have all this technology. We were small, communities in different places. And as human beings, we're hardwired. We need that sense of belonging. And the thing that I think was a beautiful gift from the whole pandemic years was that we were able to start talking about emotional health and well-being. And these have been researched now. So there's a lot of, things that people can look at and having that sense of belonging. the cultures that were really good and thriving did pretty well during those years. And it's the same thing that's happening with AI. AI is like a mirror, it's reflecting back. So if it's a really toxic environment, it's going to show up, and it's just going to amplify that more. If it's a culture that's really, caring about people and has great values, it's going to show that even more, and they're going to take off. So I'm seeing this great divide happening right now between purpose-driven companies that care about the people and are using technology in a way to enhance the workplace versus those that are maybe more toxic or don't necessarily care so much about the people. It's just assets for them and they can just get rid of them and replace everybody by humanoid robotics and all that kind of stuff. And you and I have talked before, and I'll bring this up here because I think it's an interesting topic. Are we going to have jobs in the future? Are we going to have this 9 to 5 job? And I don't think we will. How it's going to look, I don't know yet. But I think having discussions around this is really important because it helps us to co-create what is it that we want to have and experience in the future.
So let me ask you one question, because that's the biggest challenge of our civilization, actually, probably of humanity. So in one end, we are building a world that effectively will not have jobs. But as humans, we need jobs to survive. So, and as well to thrive. If you don't have a job, you don't have a sense of purpose, you don't have a lot of things. So as a certified CIQ coach, and as well an expert in conversational intelligence, and as well advising leaders, I ask one question to myself every day as a leader, but then I think we need to vocal this. Is the challenge is why are we creating some of these AI systems if we are destroying our jobs? And I'm asking this more and more, and I'm thinking to become much more vocal, because I think it's completely a disaster what you're doing, because we don't need some of these AIs. And for instance, I'm shifting my AIs to become much more personal assistants and not this radical AGI obsession that doesn't solve anyone. And as well, an obsession with the infrastructure that we need in terms of AI, but not in the infrastructure for the sake of infrastructure, especially robotics and so forth. So I think with your background on this, what you would say to leaders, because effectively we have actually, all of us and people listening to me have a power that they're not using, because we have to stop some of these developments, because our children will not have a job. And let's be realistic. I think I don't want to say this, but I have to say this. So, and as well as someone that deals with leaders every day, how can we vocal this? But as well, I think we need to be more, I think, shout louder, or at least be smart the way you do it. Because everyone is kind of seeing the elephant in the room, but everyone is running away from it. And it's just say, okay, I'll just keep going with my life. But okay, things will come. And of course, there's other challenges as well, because our humanity is more complex. But just on this subject, especially in your background as a leader of leaders and as a coach of leaders.
Ooh, there's a lot to unpack there. Okay, so first of all, we are human beings and we need to make a decision. Do we want to keep our humanness, or do we want to go the path of merging humans and technology? And I personally come from a belief system that we are, souls having this great experience here. I don't believe that we need to outsource our technology. I believe that AI is a bit of a stepping stone for us to remind us, like all these different, innate abilities that we might have within us. We as human beings need that human to human connection. That's why work is great. However, we are in a system that is crashing and burning right now. Our old industrial systems are collapsing. That's why there's so much chaos right now. So the question and the opportunity for us is, what do we want to build? And I believe that we have this program inside of ourselves that we're supposed to have a job. We need to make money to pay the bills, to, have this purpose in life or whatever. And the question is, do we really need to? I mean, if we were able to come up with, say, technology out there, and I believe it exists somewhere, but like free energy and all of those types of things, how does that change the world? What about, with AI freeing up from all the things that we hate to do? I see a lot because people are, concerned that I want to have AI do the things I don't want to do, like the dishes and the laundry versus, coming up with images or writing articles or whatever the case might be. So we really need to be very deliberate on how we want to use AI and how we want to use it in a way that's going to be beneficial to humanity. And, it comes back to all those science fiction movies and, Star Trek and the Jetsons and all of those things. It's like, okay, do we want to have a life like that? And if we just look at the life right now, people are completely overwhelmed. overstressed, and the stress, I mean, more people die of heart attacks on Monday morning than any other time because they're, stressed about their jobs. And how much are the jobs that we're doing, if we're not passionate and loving everything that we're doing, what kind of an impact is it having on the relationships? One of the reasons I've been so passionate about engagement is because I came across a study with, I think I read it in Psychology Today or something, but basically, parents who work really hard and hate their jobs come home and they're not the best parents, and the children see that. Whereas children who see parents who maybe they work hard and the parents feel guilty because they're loving their job, but they're coming home and they're feeling satisfied with, or happy about what they're doing, those children actually thrive. Whereas the children seeing their parents working hard and coming home and miserable, those have higher levels of depression, higher levels of suicide. I mean, it was just a shocking thing. So that was why I became so passionate about engagement. And I think, we really need to be mindful about what it is that we want to develop and how we want to use it, and use it in a way that benefits humanity. You get me on my soapbox and I'll keep going. And then I forgot what the main question was.
No, you answered the question.
Did I answer it? Okay.
How we cope with looking. I think it's just answered in a very fantastic way. Is that I think we cope through example, but there's of course the elephant in the room is how we get the leaders to not build something for the sake of building. Because I think we have. I was recently in an event and we were talking about just numbers. For instance, if you look at the world economy, the depth of the world economy is around $330 trillion. The world economy is around 15 trillion. The shadow economy is $12.5 trillion. And just the top 7 companies in the world, which most of them are tech, are worth $12 trillion. So that means the shadow economy and 7 companies are the same size. So we have a huge disparity. And as well, we're building all this technology that 90% of the population of the world doesn't understand, because there's 800 people using ChatGPT more or less, 1 billion, 2 billion using gaming and technology, but still a lot of other parts. Although they know part of it, they don't have a clue what is happening. So coming here, and I want to touch the case study that you have public, that Easy Park case study that involved 320 employees across 15 countries. And this was during the pandemic. So on a practical level, what did that experience teach you about, first of all, managing people in so much different countries and substantial number of people, but as well, how we can connect these people? Because when people are in different countries and they have to keep productivity, competition, and as well different time zones and a lot of other things that we discussed. But I would like for you to, whatever you can share with us.
Yeah, that was really a fascinating experiment, or process that we did with them. But we divided it into 2 because there was time differences between everybody, and so not everybody was in the training at the same time, but we had 2 different groups at the same time. And then I was doing breakout rooms, and what was interesting is most companies, especially as they scale and grow, they start to become siloed, and so you only deal with the people in your various departments, and so you might not necessarily, marketing might not talk to the developers and the program managers. And so when we were going through this, everybody was learning and growing together, learning these tools, and then we'd do breakout rooms, and they would have these great conversations with people they would normally not interact with. And so it built these bridges. So it broke down any sort of silos there. And I mean, they had a great culture to start with. The CEO at the time there was very committed to creating an environment where people, felt really good going home from work. And so it was really elevating them to kind of the next level of how they could create this. And it was really powerful to see. And, I love doing those types of trainings because I just know the impact that it has. When you learn about the neuroscience, when you learn about, these types of things. And here's the thing, we were talking about earlier what leaders need to be doing, basically. They need to invest in their people. And especially right now, the younger people coming in are maybe the most educated, but the least experienced. And they need to become up to speed. And, they're hungry for education. They're hungry to learn. And so when you create a learning environment inside of a company, it doesn't matter the size of the company, but if you have that in there, then people will learn and grow together, and it actually increases the retention levels and basically be able to, it helps you to increase the productivity as well. And all of those things come down to the bottom line. So there is a lot of research out there that shows that if you invest in your people, if you invest in creating a great culture, it actually has, a huge impact, positive impact on the bottom line as well. And it's because you get people collaborating and working together. One of the things I can just share with you here that we haven't talked about is the framework that I have defined culture. And there's 5 cultural keys. And the first one is collaboration. I think that is so important. Collaborate with each other, with teams. It's coming together, working together, sharing ideas, and really being able to lift each other up. The second one is creativity. So allowing that innovation to come from within the organization. Your employees have their best ideas, so ask them, and start to develop that. The third cultural key is connection. So how do we connect on a deeper emotional level? That's through the values, through the purpose, but basically this human to human contact that we desperately need as individuals. The fourth cultural key is contribution or celebration. Sorry, celebration. So how are you celebrating things? It's recognition. It's looking at what's going well. It's learning from the mistakes that we've made and moving things forward. And then the last one is contribution. And how are you giving something back in some way? So you're tying in the business to something that's doing good. And as an individual, how are you contributing to your team, or how are you contributing to the organization? And so those things made culture very tangible and measurable. And then we get into the other layers of trust. But I think it's important that, again, as I've mentioned before, as individuals, we take responsibility for our lives. Anything that's happened prior to the moment you take 100% responsibility for your life, you forgive yourself for, because you were young, you were stupid, you made mistakes, you realized, oh my gosh, how could I make those kind of decisions or whatever? But you forgive yourself and you move on. But then you understand, you take that power and I'm going to be active in creating the life that I want to experience. And then when you bring it into the organization as a group, you come together and you create this environment where people can thrive. And Gallup now is actually measuring, like, do you thrive at work? And I think it's really interesting that they brought that word into their research in the last few years. Over the COVID years, I think is when it started. Because what does that mean? When you're thriving, you're reaching the best version of yourself. You're reaching your highest potential. And if you can do that in a workplace, and as leaders, if you can create an environment where everyone is reaching that, it's like a no-brainer. Of course, you're going to have a great business and a great company that's thriving.
I love this, and it's very important. I expect everyone to take notes on this and act on it, because it's easy in the theory, but the practices and all that. So, for the sake of time, I have my last 2 questions, and one of them is quite big. The other one is more about your community. So, as the co-founder of the Achieving the AI Advantage, that is a global online summit that brings together experts in AI and business. And as well, like you mentioned, the event promotes ethical AI use and supports leaders in using technology to improve business outcomes. So we've been attracting thousands of people around the world, and we actually build a community of leaders focused on this AI and responsible AI practices. So first of all, tell us about this initiative. And then second, what has been kind of the input or some areas that probably didn't expect from people to have? And then the third part is, from all these leaders, from one to another, what would be the readiness in terms of AI readiness that they think they are? I'm sure at top level, of course.
Okay. All right. So the Achieving the AI Advantage Summit, we had the first one in September of 2025 now. And the goal is to have it twice a year. And it's just really to create an environment where leaders who believe in these values of AI for good and believe in creating a company environment where people can thrive and do really well, that we come together. Because oftentimes those leaders over the years, I've found that they felt very isolated. They felt like, I'm the only one that thinks this way. And, that's becoming more and more well known, but it's not the norm yet. So we need to kind of bring all of our voices from your community, from my community, like-minded communities together, so that we have a loud enough voice, collective voice together, to really impact these humongo companies, like you mentioned, that are, really driving the whole technology and AI fronts right now, and make sure that we're doing it in a way that makes sense for everybody, for the whole planet, for humanity, all of that. In terms of, how ready leaders are, it obviously depends on who you're talking to, but in general, I would say on a scale of, 1 to 100, 30, 40% maybe, maybe I'm being really generous there. Most companies, like I said in the very beginning, most leaders don't have the time and energy to be doing that on top of what they need to be doing. So when a company can really commit to investing in their people, investing in the culture, investing in, technology, and what I always recommend for companies is start small and then see what works and then allow people to make mistakes because things are going to happen. But there are a lot of ethical questions, with cybersecurity and IT security and all of those things that have to be considered too. So there's so much on the plate for every leader right now. It makes it hard for them to, keep track of everything. The one thing I can definitely say is it's not going away. The sooner you get on the boat, the better it's going to be, or the train or whatever you want to call it. It's a fast, high-speed train happening right now. um, you know, and we're all going to make mistakes. But here, I often refer to AI and technology right now as the great equalizer, because it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter where you're coming from. We're all learning this together. So what can we do to support each other and, help each other up? So there's people who are far advanced from where I am and from where you are, Dinesh, and there's people that are far behind. So we need to just kind of grab hands and pull each other up and keep going and help each other learn and figure out what's the best way, because otherwise, and okay, so I'll back up here. We have a choice point right now, and I'm actually writing a book on this, and this is the first premiere I'm saying this because I just started it recently, but it's called the AI dystopia or utopia, and it's basically the choice point for our humanity right now. And I'm just like, okay, we got to get this out there as quickly as possible because, it's going to make a huge difference. And I want an awareness of that as individuals, we have this power to choose, just like, the traumas and the crisis that we go through, we can choose to respond versus just have a reaction. So how do we do that collectively across the globe? How do we choose to create a world that we actually are going to be thrilled? And, anybody that has children, or going to have grandchildren, you want to leave a world behind that is going to be good for them. So really, we need to be having these conversations. We need to be asking these questions, discussing them. And sometimes, and I can't remember where I wrote this, but somewhere it was like, sometimes we have to slow down to speed up again. And I think that's where we are right now. Let's just take some time, have some good conversations, and figure out what is the right direction. What are the values we want to instill in everything we're doing?
Wonderful and very inspiring. So my last question, and it touched where you touch, where you left right now. So as an AI coach and a certified as well coach and a leader as well, CEO of Evoloshen and the co-founder of Achieving the AI Advantage. So you mentioned think about the things and a lot of inspiring ways of looking at this, but definitely there's an elephant in the room with the content. For instance, you mentioned 32,000 of 35,000 companies that are working AI, but it's obvious that most of them will disappear. Of course, right now is how we can look. So the question is, from all these leaders that you've been dealing, first of all, how can we avoid that the fear of AI will erode our human connections? How can as well make sure that AI enhances rather than replaces our humanity and work? And as well for the CEOs, I think if you could look at what are the non-negotiables that any leader needs to focus on.
Okay. Big questions, Dinesh.
Sorry.
So no, it's good. I love these kind of conversations. So, everything always comes back to the individual. As individuals, we need to figure out a way to thrive. And, we need to embrace the technology. We need to get ourselves up to speed. There's a very famous saying that everyone is saying right now, you're not going to be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by someone who knows how to work with AI. Okay, great. Well, get yourself as an individual up to speed on that. For leaders, I think, it comes back to the basics again. It's like, and I've said this many times now, but trust is so important. We need to build trust in our organizations. We need to build trust in the technology we're using. And, sometimes we feel overwhelmed because we go too big and macro, and you need to bring it down to what's your sphere of influence as a leader. Okay, it's your company, it's your family, it's your universe or whatever you're working with. So how can you build high levels of trust there? So the first advice or things that I would say for leaders to think about is how can you create a strong foundation of trust? And then also, since you are in a leadership type of role, like how do you create that culture that people want to be a part of? They want to be part of the journey. So it's having that vision, that purpose of where you're going and getting people to come along on that ride and making it fun, right? That's why I always talk about joy, because I don't believe we were born to live miserable lives. We were meant to have a lot of joy and passion for everything that we're doing. And then really, come back to the whole AI and technology, like don't wait, like get on it now, because if you don't, you will be left behind. And it's not that we want to instill fear in people for that. It's just that we need to build this in a way that needs everybody who shares these types of values to be a part of it, whether you're using it because you're training it based on your values. And, the more we can train the AIs to be exposed to people who think this way, the better it's going to be for everybody. So those would be my kind of three things that I would leave for leaders as well.
They are very important. So, Karen, it's been a fantastic roller coaster, and we passed 1 hour. First of all, I want to thank you personally because you've been inspiring me in a lot of ways that probably I didn't thought about it. As well, your community is amazing. Congratulations to all that work you've achieved. And then, of course, on the personal level, I have just to say respect for your resilience, persistence, and love that you show, but as well the joy. And I think that's probably the most inspiring thing. And it makes me much stronger because I probably never went to probably not even 1% of the stress you went. And I'm very grateful to have you here with me and with us. And for people listening to us, I think rethink, because I think if you look at your smile and the way you kept always this wonderful energy, that shows as well that we can bring the best of humanity among all the challenges. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to be promoting and as well doing other things with you. I think this will be the take one. There'll be other takes, but Karen, it's really mind-blowing for a lot of ways for me, rethinking even my personal developing me as a leader, and as well the way we bring this humanity to AI.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and inviting me to be here and share with your community. And like I said before, I love your work and I love everything that you're, helping to elevate humanity as well. So I'm glad our paths have crossed.